This is my Long Island.
People that have never been to Long Island, oh, you're from Strong Island, Strong Island. They don't even know anything about Long Island. For me, Long Island is a great, or Strong Island, when they say Strong Island, it's about a group of people that come together and care about each other and are able to exist. And it's amazing. Nowhere else in the world is it like this.
Long Island, New York. How would you describe Long Island? Well, in the simplest way, Long Island is a small mass of land surrounded by water. But for those of us that live here, or have lived on Long Island, there is just no simple way to describe Long Island. There is just too much complexity and diversity that exists here. Long Island, by some, is viewed as an ideal paradise island. There is a high quality of life, beautiful coastal shorelines, and attractive beaches. Islands within Long Island, the Pine Barrens, nature preserves, abundant parks, and ample farms and wineries. Until the explosion of suburban development following World War II, Long Island was geographically a diverse region, with beaches, hills, woods, prairies, petrified forests, and small rural fishing and farming communities. Now, the Long Island landscape is dominated by suburban towns, city development, incorporated or unincorporated villages, and a plethora of rural communities. With a dense population and continuing development of infrastructure, Long Island's mystique is due to its immense diversity of ethnic cultures, scenery, politics, religion, and economic standing.
Well, I always say that we have salt water in our veins. When you're a Long Islander, there's something about Long Island that is in you. It's part of you. Growing up here, and then having the privilege of being a newscaster, I have a first-hand look at the people and who they are. And Long Islanders are a community. We're a very big community.
My name is Dan Marquardt, filmmaker and a lifelong resident of Long Island. Although I was not born here, I was adopted into a beautiful family in the village of Rockville Center, Long Island, since the age of 3. I'm not an educator, nor a doctor or a professor. I don't hold a master's degree or a doctorate in anything. I'm just simply a filmmaker, and I love my Long Island. I'm an enthusiast, captured by the beauty of where I live. And when I say beauty, I mean both the beauty of the landscape and the beauty of the people.
Every time you see Long Island on the news, it's always negative. And, you know, the Gilgo Beach, Amityville House, Amy Fisher, all these things that Long Island makes the news for are always negative. Our idea that really Dan came up with, it was to show Long Island in a very positive way, because there are things that are happening here that are bigger than just what happens in the news, nation or worldwide.
Along with my friend and colleague Sergei Tizarev, another filmmaker and former resident of the village of Rockville Center as well, we decided we were going to film our beautiful Long Island and showcase it for what it's really about. For Sergei and I, we feel a deep connection with our home here on the island, and wonder why nobody has ever really done a documentary of our beautiful Long Island. You don't realize just how beautiful Long Island is until you capture it on film. Breathtaking.
We do have a great diversity, and all of those cultures sort of fulminating with each other and working off each other, and I think it just makes our neighborhoods great.
This is our Long Island. This is my Long Island. This is my Long Island.
The biggest thing that inspires me here on Long Island, and I was thinking about it, is actually the people, because I think that, you know, no matter what Long Island does go through, whether it be the economy, the weather, the just everything, it's the way we all come together, you know, to overcome whatever obstacle, or to support, or, you know, just to be there, to show, it's like this big family.
As of 2010, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, Long Island's population is a little over 7.5 million people. This total includes the counties of Brooklyn, Kings County, and Queens County.
One of the great arguments, and I know you and I have had this debate as well, you know, Brooklyn and Queens.
Now, as far as I'm concerned, they're not Long Island. I know you'll argue and say they are. I'm saying that they are not Long Island. Long Island's by itself. Brooklyn is a borough, and so is Queens. Although I know that geographically they're attached, I just don't consider them part of Long Island. I grew up that way, saying, you know, people in Queens say, I'm going out to Long Island today.
There are those here in New York and Long Island that will argue Brooklyn and Queens is not a part of Long Island, but a part of the 5 boroughs of the city of New York, which they are. However, if you were to remove all the bridges and physically take Long Island out of the water, alongside with Nassau and Suffolk County, while the 2 other counties are Brooklyn and Queens. So, yes, they are a part of Long Island.
And before we get into this whole ridiculous argument about whether or not Brooklyn and Queens are part of the island, take a look at a map of the island. An island is land surrounded by water. Long Island looks like a fish. The head of the fish, that's Brooklyn and Queens. You take away the bridges, you're still with us. So don't even give me that argument.
If Long Island was a state, it would be considered to be the 13th most populated state, but number 1 in population density. The definition of population density is a measurement of population per unit area or unit volume. It is frequently applied to living organisms, and particularly to humans. It is a key geographic term. Almost 8 million people. Man, that is a hell of a lot of people. Let me break this down for you. Long Island stretches out to almost 120 miles, from New York Harbor to Montauk Point. Hence the name, Long Island. From the North Shore to the South Shore, it is about 23 miles in width. The dense population here makes Long Island one of the most populated islands in the world, putting us ahead of places like Jamaica and Ireland. What this means on Long Island is that there's almost 5,500 people per every square mile in a land area that's about 1,500 square miles. With a total population of all 4 counties of Long Island equaling more than 7.5 million people, this makes up almost 40% of the state of New York's population. Breaking it down even further, per county, Brooklyn-Kings County holds the highest number of residents with a population of 2.5+ million people. It's funny because Brooklyn and Queens, being the smaller 2 counties physically of Long Island, they actually Brooklyn holds the highest rate of residents.
Right.
And I think more for the simple reason is
Apartment buildings.
they build
Yes.
up. As we spread out to Nassau and Suffolk,
Yeah.
we spread out.
Yes.
Queens County holds the 2nd highest number of residents with a population of 2,200,000 plus people. Nassau County holds the least amount of residents with a population of 1,300,000 plus people.
Nassau County is a very diverse community. We have over 1.3 million residents. It's actually bigger than 11 states.
For decades, Nassau County held a larger population than Suffolk County. But in the 90s, as development and infrastructure grew, Suffolk County surpassed Nassau County and now holds a population of 1.5+ million people.
The largest county in the state of New York, it's nearly 1.6 million people now out of the latest census. That's larger than a couple of the boroughs in New York City.
When you have millions of people confined to a space that's only 120 miles long and 23 miles wide, there must be a reason for it.
I would say that I'm a Brooklyn boy at heart, but I'm a happy Long Islander.
And this is my Long Island.
What is it about Long Island that draws and houses such an array of people? What is the mystique of Long Island? The cachet that has millions wanting to be here, including the rich and famous, who can go anywhere but choose to be here on Long Island.
Its mystique, I think, comes probably more from the celebrities out in the Hamptons and Fire Island than anything else. We've also had a lot of very famous and successful people come from Long Island. And I think the reason for that is because of New York City and the fact that the most ambitious people in the world are drawn to the city. It's what unites most New Yorkers. They're all here for the same reason, and that's to better their situation. So when you have that many ambitious people in one area, there are good things that are going to come out of that. Now, not everybody wants to raise their children within the 5 boroughs of New York, so they move out to suburbs like Nassau and Suffolk, where the quality of life is a little bit better, where, you know, you can have your kids in good schools and live in relatively crime-free neighborhoods. As far as our cachet, I think Long Island's cachet comes in the fact that it has great natural beauty, and it is within striking distance of the greatest city in the history of human civilization.
That's a good point. We're pretty much in the mecca of everything.
Well, we're right in the mix. We're right in the center of it, you know. I mean, New York is, I've been in cities all over the world. There's nothing like New York. No, nothing else comes close. Paris, maybe, you know.
I haven't been to Paris, but maybe one day.
Yeah.
With such a mass volume of people occupying a small territory like Long Island, you're bound to make an impact on the world. Good, bad, or indifferent.
It's the place I grew up. It's the place I love. This is my Long Island.
Long Island has been the focus of many documentaries of things that have happened here or are happening. Stories that have even sparked made-for-television movies to major motion pictures. Documentaries like Modern Tide, which documents the rich heritage of mid-century modern architecture here on Long Island. Wonderland, a quirky documentary of Levittown and some of its residents. Grey Gardens, and so many more. As Sergey has mentioned, Long Island has made national and international news, none of which I feel portray Long Island in a true sense. Even more recently, there has been a new reality show on Bravo called Princesses, Long Island. There's this new show that's out on Bravo, I think it is. It's called Princess.
Yeah.
About what is the Long Island?
Well, I caught an episode. It's about Long Island Jewish girls. That's what it's about.
It's embarrassing.
It's really embarrassing.
You know, it's not to knock the show, and not even to knock the cast and the crew, but it's definitely not a depiction of who we are as Long Islanders.
It's not real. It's all BS. I watch the show. I think it was BS. It looks very stagey to me.
Right. I
think they're just, and I agree with you. It depicts Long Island terribly.
I want to portray to you a true sense of who we are as New Yorkers and what we are as Long Islanders. Long Island is New York. Long Island is not a state in its own. As far as titles are concerned, we are New Yorkers, not Long Islanders. I want to set the record straight on that. You're not going to call an individual from Atlanta, Georgia, an Atlantean, are you? Or someone from South Beach, Florida, a South Beacher? No, you're not. I'm a New Yorker from Long Island. But it's not that simple.
Yes, Long Islanders are New Yorkers, but there are particular distinctions. We Long Islanders love our suburban way of life, but at the same time, we have a love for an urban way of life. We are very proud of our proximity to New York City.
And for the so-called naysayers, and individuals who want to put Long Island down simply because we exist, well, maybe you just need to get the time to know us better. It's like me coming to your house and going, ew. The 2 bruises on my ass are going to be one from your foot and the other one from the front door. But I'm not here to kick anybody in the ass. I'm kind of here to say why you should have faith in Long Island, why you should believe in Long Island.
It's really a wonderful, wonderful place, again, to live, work, and raise a family. And I'm so very proud of all that we offer here in Long Island.
Hopefully, by the end of this, you'll see Long Island in a better light.
This is my Long Island. Long Island is a central point of many great areas for people to visit, see, and you have everything there.
So, where do we start? I guess the beginning is always best. How Long Island came to be. How was Long Island formed? A simple way of putting it would be that Long Island was formed by rock, sand, sediment, and gravel that were all left as debris from glaciers during the Ice Age. To be more specific, Long Island was formed due to the Wisconsin glaciers during the Ice Age 21,000 years ago, and then again in 19,000 BC, forming what has become Long Island's iconic shape. Believe it or not, the ground in which Long Island was formed and settled on was physically a part of Connecticut, not New York. What we now know to be the Long Island Sound originally was a shallow and dry basin. Over thousands of years, rivers would carve and cut out this basin even deeper and deeper, and the glaciers would carve out the basin even more deeply. Around 12,000 years ago, when the glaciers melted worldwide, the sea level raised and seawater filled the basin, and the Long Island Sound was formed. The first of two spines of glacial moraines were formed 21,000 years ago, forming the Southern Moraine. Today, we refer to it as the South Shore of Long Island. The Southern Moraine is what we call the backbone of Long Island. It is also known as the Ronkonkoma Moraine. It runs through the center of Long Island and is roughly the length of our Long Island Expressway. The glacier receded for a few thousand more years and then halted again. As the rate of melting increased, the Northern Moraine, also known as the Harbor Hill Moraine, our North Shore, was formed. Aligned with the North Fork of Long Island, the Northern Moraine reaches certain areas of the North Shore.
From Atlantic Beach to Montauk Point, the oceans of Long Island are the most beautiful in the world.
The North Shore beaches are rocky, whereas the South Shore beaches are sandy outwashes. The reason for the two major differences in the shorelines is that when you look at the North Shore, it lies along the calm waters of the Long Island Sound, while the South Shore takes a constant pounding and beating from the roughness of the Atlantic Ocean.
And seeing the Atlantic Ocean rolling up at your doorstep, you know what? There's nothing cooler than that.
And I'm proud to say that this is my Long Island.
When the glaciers melted, Long Island had two deep kettle lakes formed. Lake Ronkonkoma, a hamlet that lies in the town of Brookhaven out in the county of Suffolk, is the largest lake on Long Island. And Lake Success, a village in the town of North Hempstead in the county of Nassau. A very cool fact about Lake Success is that the Sperry Gyroscope Company, which was a major American equipment and electronics company, started in 1910, existed for more than 7 decades, also became the temporary home for the United Nations from 1946 to 1951. Pretty awesome. Along the moraines lie two of the highest hills of Long Island. Bald Hill, which is a summit in the town of Brookhaven, rises to about 101 meters high. Bald Hill has now become another great tourist attraction here on Long Island. A Vietnam Veterans Memorial was dedicated on November 11th, 1991, and includes a 100-foot high obelisk-shaped monument painted red, white, and blue. When visiting the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, the monument captivates you. On a clear day, while visiting the monument, if you look to the south, you'll be able to see Fire Island, one of Long Island's barrier islands. And if you look to the north, you'll be able to see the Long Island Sound. The highest point of Long Island is Janes Hill, reaching 122 meters or 401 feet at its highest elevation. Janes Hill has had several names throughout its existence. It has also been known as Oakley Hill, High Hills, and West Hills. Janes Hill is located along the Walt Whitman Trail, and due east of Janes Hill lies the birthplace of one of America's greatest and beloved poets, Walt Whitman himself.
O Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every rack, the prize we sought is won. The port is near, the bells I hear, the people all exulting, while follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring.
This is my Long Island.
Our culture is second to none with all our Long Island Indians. They're still out in reservations.
When you're talking about celebrating what Long Island is, you can't have that conversation without talking about Native Americans.
The history and heritage of our native Long Island tribes should never be forgotten by the people of Long Island today. These are the true natives of Long Island. Yet, sometimes it seems the cultural heritage of our natives have vanished into the unwritten archives of our native Long Island history. The people of Long Island today need to remember and understand the diversity and the impact of many native cultures here in Long Island. Our native history here was once full of an indigenous people. Where are they today? Where did they go?
The problem for the Native Americans with the settlers here on Long Island predominantly was that the settlers brought illnesses that they were not exposed to, and that's really what happened. It was the demise of the Native American population, smallpox and things like that, that the Native Americans here on Long Island were not had been exposed to, and that's a big part of the why the Native American population didn't survive.
And we know by the recorded epidemics when these occurred. There were certain times where the specific outbreaks of disease did occur, and many people would still die in numbers of this. And some of the early settlers did find abandoned villages and things where the native settlements, including the Shinnecock people or Montauk or Okeechobee or others of the various communities on the island, might have had to leave a village, and travel other places, or maybe they had just abandoned those. Too many people died there, and it wasn't the right place to stay. In the early part of the 20th century, there was a prevailing attitude that was brought forward in a lot of literature and popular culture at the time that the Native American was over, his civilization was on the way out, and the sun was setting on the noble red man, so to speak. That was kind of the concept.
we are still an integral part of the American society, even though we are the forgotten people, as they say.
Here on Long Island, many of the towns and villages are named after the native tribes that once existed here. The Carnissi, the Mineola, the Rockaway, Matinecock, Massapequa, Mattatuck, Cutchogue, Montauk, and many more.
Obviously, anybody who grew up on Long Island, they know the names Massapequa, Shinnecock, Hauppauge, many other Indian names and tribes. A lot of people don't realize that these are Indian reservations. They think of casinos and other things like that, but they are sovereign nations with their own government that are running the tribe and the reservation.
You know, the Indian person was noble, and he was a child of nature.
Before the schools, the banks, the railroads, all the people, and the infrastructure of today, this was a Long Island landscape. Virgin territory, practically untouched by man for thousands of years, allowing Long Island to flourish. As beautiful as these landscapes are, Long Island at the time was a harsh environment to adapt to. The first settlers migrated here after the glaciers receded. They settled in by working, farming, and cultivating the land, fishing the bays and the waterways of Long Island, eventually becoming the natives of our Long Island. These natives of the land lived undisturbed for nearly half a millennia until the arrival of the Europeans in the 16th century. What was known as the contact period in the 1500s, the Indians of Long Island occupied the land from Brooklyn to Montauk Point. In 1524, sailing under the French flag for King Francis I, Italian Florentine explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano landed in what is now New York Harbor, describes Long Island as well-peopled, so commodious and delightful, and his view of the Indians as being dressed out in feathers of birds of various colors. Englishman Henry Hudson in 1609 describes Long Island as lands pleasant with grass, flowers and goodly trees as they had ever seen, and very sweet smells come from them. The natives at the time were referred to as groups or extended families, not tribes, living in certain geographic locations by the ponds, rivers, and beaches, areas in which each group took their names. Many historians have written that Long Island had 13 original tribes, but the natives argue that Long Island has had 20 to 26 tribes, possibly more.
As far as the numbers of tribal groups on the island, it was a great number, but no, I don't think anybody knows today exactly how many. That whole 13 tribes was originally created by a writer, probably an early amateur archaeologist. He probably put it together based on his research at the time, and it became set in stone. You know, it was printed over and over and over again.
The fact that we have this here still, Long Island, a vibrant, rich Native American culture, shows that we are truly a community and a culture that embraces our diversity, that embraces our history and preserves our history, and that makes me ever so more proud to be a Long Islander.
You know, we were whalers originally, so in our original way of life, we provided whale oil and substance to the local people that settled here in the town of Southampton, and we took them in and taught them the normal things that they didn't know at that time, how to survive the winters, grow corn, how to hunt, how to fish, and those things were part of our livelihood, which we taught to the others, and it's helped us and it's helped them survive, you know, over this time period.
Although their numbers have dwindled drastically, the few natives that have survived and remained here on Long Island continue showcasing and sharing their rich history and heritage, educating the people of today through their annual powwows, such as the Palmernock powwows and the Shinnecock powwows.
The Native American populations that are here are a critical part of Long Island, its economy, its culture.
There are museums throughout Long Island, like the Garvey's Point Museum and Preserve in Glen Cove, which is a valued resource in the study of Long Island's Native American archaeology. And the Shinnecock Nation Cultural Center and Museum, which is dedicated to honoring the Native ancestors and the living history as Algonquin descendants. Only 2 reservations exist here on Long Island, the Poospatuck Reservation and the Shinnecock Reservation. Both out in the county of Suffolk, these reservations do not look like your stereotypical Hollywood image or school textbook image of an Indian reservation. Poospatuck and Shinnecock serve as a reminder of what was once a great cultural entity here in our Long Island. The Shinnecock Nation is a prime example of staying strong and sticking firm to their roots. In 1703, the town of Southampton purchased the land from the Shinnecocks for only $20 and gave the Shinnecocks a 1,000-year lease on 3,500 acres. But in 1859, the state reduced the Shinnecock holdings to only 800 acres in negotiations for a railroad right-of-way. In 1978, the Shinnecock Nation filed for formal recognition as an Indian tribe, with the hopes and possibility of reclaiming their original 3,500 acres of land. 32 years later, in 2010, I am now proud to say that finally, after a lengthy battle, the Bureau of Indian Affairs gave formal recognition to the Shinnecock Nation as an Indian tribe. All I can say is, it's about time. And congratulations to my Native brothers and sisters here on Long Island.
I grew up here, I choose to live here, and this is my Long Island.
All right, so I'm sitting here with one of the greatest inspirations in my life, my grandfather, Gene Murray. Grandpa, thank you for coming on.
Danny.
The incorporated village of Rockville Center. My hometown, my Graceland. Explain to me what an incorporated village is.
You control your own zoning. The town controls the zoning. You govern yourselves, you can have your own police department. Not every village has its own police. Very few of them have their own water departments. They have water companies in the village that supply many villages and unincorporated areas. We also have our own public works, sanitation, every support a village.
It's a wonderful place to live, Rockville Center. Obviously, our own volunteer fire department, which is one of the best in New York State. We have our own police department, which is also, if not the best in New York State, right up to the top.
Rockville Center got its name around 1850 when Robert Pettit moved here and built his general store. So they came upon the name of Rockville Center.
That's Rockville Center, not Rockefeller Center.
Right.
Complete difference. There's so many unique things about the village of Rockville Center. I argue that Rockville Center is somewhat the heartbeat of Long Island.
I would say, I'm not sure that it's the heartbeat of Long Island, but it is typical of the heartbeat of Long Island. To say that Rockville Center is at the heart of it, I think you can almost say that it's hard to identify a location on the island that is its heart. But to say that we are typical of its heartbeat, I would say yes.
We've had a lot of firsts here in Rockville Center. Arthur Rose Eldred became the first Eagle Scout in America, but his brother founded the first Boy Scout troop here in Rockville Center.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
so
it
the
is.
first troop actually existed here in Rockville Center.
Yes.
And this became a national impact in some way, I guess, because the way, I mean, you look at the Boy Scouts today. So whenever you talk about the first Eagle Scout, it'll always come back here.
Right. The first credit card was issued here by Arthur T. Roth, who was the president of the Franklin National Bank. I say I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing.
For those of you in credit card debt, I bet you're loving us now.
Yeah. The first ATM machine.
Whoa, the first ATM machine?
On Long Island, I would imagine. First ATM machine was set up here at the railroad station.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
I like that we have where the head of the diocese for like the whole Long Island. St. Agnes Cathedral.
The Diocese of Rockville Center was formed from the Diocese of Brooklyn in 1957 by Pope Pius XII for the simple reason of population. And Reverend Walter P. Kellenberg was named its bishop. The Diocese of Rockville Center is the 6th largest diocese in the United States, and St. Agnes Cathedral is the largest cathedral on Long Island, and in my eyes, one of the most beautiful buildings here on Long Island. The cathedral was constructed in a 15th century Norman Gothic style and is the base for the diocese. The parish of St. Agnes was founded in 1887 when the first Mass was celebrated at Walter Johnson's blacksmith shop with an anvil as the altar. As a matter of fact, that anvil still exists, displayed on the front lawn as you enter the cathedral. By 1890, the blacksmith shop could no longer accommodate the parishioners. In 1905, a white marble stone church was built to serve the Catholic population of Rockville Center. Due to the increasing number of parishioners, the small marble church grew insufficient for the needs of the parish, so demolition began in 1933 under the direction of Monsignor Peter Queally. And in 1935, the current building was completed.
To sing God's grace, then when we'd first begun.
I actually was born and raised in Rockville Center, as was my father. So I'm second generation and then third generation. there's, I guess there's a saying, they all come home to Rockville Center, which is, I've noticed to be quite true.
Rockville Center is just a small but vital fragment of the rich history and heritage of Long Island. My dear friend, Janine O'Brien, describes Rockville Center best. Rockville Center is like a mini New York City, with so many restaurants surrounded by small mom-and-pop shops that make Rockville Center so personal. It thrives on the hustle and bustle, yet never loses its charm. What makes Rockville Center special are the tree-lined streets that showcase the well-kept homes, each one of them being different, but within the same Rockville Center style. It's a classy town that only gets better, all while keeping the same feel. My friend Janine is right. It is my opinion that there are so many towns and villages among Long Island that seem to fabricate themselves much like the village of Rockville Center. We have one of the best school districts in the nation right here in my hometown.
Well, we had the first high school on what was then considered the south side of Long Island and called the South Shore.
Southside comes from the fact that many years ago there were really just very, very few school districts on the island itself.
It welcomes both residents and non-resident students.
The high school here in Rockville Center was developed to serve the entire south side of Long Island.
The first junior high school program on Long Island, on the whole of Long Island, was also founded here.
Oh, really?
And the students shared the high school.
So a lot of kids, a lot of people came here by rail or by however they could get here, and we served a number of different communities, just not the Rockville Center community.
When you look at what the village of Rockville Center is today, it is my opinion that much of the aura of Rockville Center is due to Gene Murray. And I say this not because he is my grandfather, but because it is the truth.
What can you say about Gene Murray? I go way back with the Murray family. I know when I was in elementary school, his dad was the postmaster. But the Murray family, all of them, you know, they just have contributed so much to the reputation, to the character, to the quality of life in Rockville Center. Can't thank him enough. Can't thank him enough. Tireless guy, 20 years as the mayor, always around, willing to help anybody, make a phone call. I need heat, I need this, I need that. That's Gene Murray. He really, really was a mayor's mayor. They don't come any better.
To my grandfather, Gene Murray, you have not only been one of the most inspirational people in my life, but to the village of Rockville Center and its residents. You are admired and revered by some of the most influential and respected people of not only Rockville Center, but all over Long Island. So, Grandpa, this is my tribute to you and your legacy.
This is my Long Island.
Speaking of influential people, Long Island has had a long and varied history of them. One of the most influential people here in our great history is this man, the Rough Rider himself, Teddy Roosevelt. Known for his cowboy persona and robust masculinity, Theodore Roosevelt Jr. was the 26th President of the United States from 1901 to 1909. Ranked as one of the top 5 American presidents in 1927 with the approval of Republican President Calvin Coolidge, Roosevelt was included in the Mount Rushmore Memorial, along with George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Abraham Lincoln. Known best for his 1901 saying, "Speak softly and carry a big stick," politicians and columnists around the globe still quote this famous saying today. From his home here in Sagamore Hill, there are remnants and reminders of this once charismatic and influential leader that are monumental across Long Island. Places like Oyster Bay and Mineola. Here's a cute and interesting fact of Theodore Roosevelt. The teddy bear. That's right, the cute and cuddly teddy bear is named for him, even though Roosevelt had a strong discontent for being called Teddy. However, the nickname was widely used by newspapers during his political career. Political cartoonist Clifford K. Berryman illustrated the president with a bear. A toy maker heard the story and asked Roosevelt if he could use his name on a toy bear. Roosevelt approved, and the teddy bear was born. Bears, and later bear cubs, became closely associated with Roosevelt in his political cartoons thereafter. The reasoning for this is that historians credit Roosevelt for changing the nation's political system by permanently placing the presidency at center stage and making character as important as the issues. It's no wonder why he's among one of the great ones.
And I'm here to tell you, you have to come to Long Island.
And this is my Long Island. The Gold Coast of Long Island is also known as the North Shore, which traditionally was designed and built up in the 1920s.
The North Shore is perhaps best known for the setting of F. Scott Fitzgerald's 1925 The Great Gatsby.
They built about 1,000 mansions at that time, which spanned across the whole North Shore.
During the late 19th century, private estates of such affluent people like the Vanderbilts, the Roosevelts, and the Whitneys, to individuals like Charles Pratt, J.P. Morgan, and F.W. Woolworth, all helped the North Shore of Long Island earn its nickname, the Gold Coast. Since then, the North Shore has had a long-held reputation of elegance.
These sites bring a richness to our lives, and they also enable us to experience our history firsthand, as opposed to reading it all in books or seeing them in movies and things like that.
Many of these stately and old money homes can be found on the North Shore. Some of the largest and most prominent ones, such as Castle Gould, also known as Hempstead House in Sands Point, Sagamore Hill, Vanderbilt Museum, Alexander P. D. Seversky, still exist but are no longer private homes. But there is one private home on the Gold Coast that is occupied, Oheka Castle, and one of my favorite places here on Long Island.
There's a lot going on in Long Island to preserve our history and our historic sites, which is really fascinating and certainly something that is very dear to my heart because I'm attached to Oheka Castle, of course, as the daughter of Gary Milius, who restored the estate.
You got to see the gorgeousness of this place. So tell us a little history. You know, so you were saying it was originally designed as a summer home?
It was designed for Otto Kahn as his summer home. Back then, they all competed who could have the biggest mansions. And
today, Oheka Castle is 3 times larger than the White House. Otto Herman Kahn's French-style mansion is now the second largest residence in the United States, thanks to a very successful Long Island developer, Gary Milius, who purchased Oheka Castle and the remaining 23 acres of the financier's estate for $1.5 million in 1984. Over the years, Gary Milius made the French-style mansion the island's most luxurious wedding palace for those wanting that fairy tale nuptial, or the prime setting for any special occasion and event. Ohika's scenic landscape has become the backdrop for the filming of many television shows and movies. Ohika Castle has also been the host to many fundraisers, charities, and benefits, as well as to the influential, the rich, and the famous. The lush surroundings recapture the vintage and glorious days of the Gold Coast at its best. Otto Kahn would have been proud to see the way Gary Milius carried on his tradition and style.
It's not just about being in the past, but it's also being in the present. And I think that's what we do really well at Ohika, is bring the present day into this historic state. So we are showcasing the history, which we don't really have to do very much of. We just have to keep the estate restored and keep telling the story. But you're sitting in this wonderful grand estate that really was built during the 1920s, but now you're experiencing it today.
For me, one of the hidden gems of Ohika Castle is this spot right here, the man cave. That's right, a man cave inside of a castle. It can't get any more awesome than that.
You're getting to dine here, you're getting to have a drink here, you're getting to enjoy the estate, even sleep in the estate. So you can experience a little bit of what it was like in 1920s, but in today's world. So I think that is really valuable to our society and something that I would love to see Long Islanders get more on board of, to be proud of.
And this is your Long Island, but this is my Long Island.
Climate change is real. More and frequent, violent, forceful storms are real. And we need to respond to that as an island. We are on the front lines of climate change.
Adrienne is right, and the proof of her statement came on October 29th, 2012, when Hurricane Sandy pounded at our doorsteps. All along the eastern seacoast, Hurricane Sandy had a devastating impact to millions. This hurricane was so powerful and immense, it literally made changes to the Long Island landscape.
Obviously, many structures damaged, many people's homes sadly damaged, many of their personal possessions, wedding albums, birth albums, christenings, bar mitzvahs. All of those treasures have been ruined for many, many people and lost, and that's a very sad state.
The last time the Long Island landscape was physically changed the way Hurricane Sandy made the changes it did was a hurricane of New England back in 1938. Back then, hurricanes didn't have names, but their explosive existence left lasting impressions. The 1938 hurricane of New England, also known as the Long Island Express, was one of the strongest storms to have ever hit Long Island. Registered as a Category 5 hurricane, the Hurricane of New England made landfall in Suffolk County on September 21st with gust winds of 125 miles an hour. This hurricane killed nearly 200 people. The immediate effect of this powerful hurricane destroyed many Long Island communities. The 38 hurricane also created the Shinnecock Inlet and widen the Mauritius Inlet. Powerful storms like these are rare, but do in fact occur. The eastern seaboard and Long Island were recently shown that example 2 years in a row. First with Hurricane Irene in 2011, a Category 2 hurricane which was later dropped to a tropical storm status as it reached Long Island, but still caused major flooding and damage, leaving more than 500,000 people without power for weeks. And Hurricane Sandy in 2012. In terms of human and economic losses, these two storms decimated Long Island and our neighbors along the eastern coastline.
For Long Island, we have a lot to do. We have to figure out how it is we're going to live on an island with more frequent and more forceful storm events. We have to protect the shoreline with natural buffers. We have to build our homes up. We have to fasten down the oil tanks. And we have to become an island that has plans and management for these types of events.
There has already been so much press and social media on the heavy-heartedness and sadness of this tragedy that I'll just let the images speak for themselves.
But the resilience of our people and the commitment to rebuild has moving us from the recovery stage to the rebuilding stage. And that's where we are right now, to try to rebuild smarter, stronger, better.
This is my Long Island.
Have a great sense of community, and when it comes to a sense of community, you're going to have a higher standard of living, a high quality of life.
We do have an example of where sides came together for the benefit of Long Island, its drinking water, and the habitat of the open spaces that we do have, and that is the protection of Long Island's pine barrens.
The public actually cares very deeply about what's going on around them. They care about the quality of life in their community. They care about the health of their families. And they care about the natural environment and protecting our natural resources. People want clean water. They want clean air. And you know what? They deserve that.
When it comes to the conservation, preservation, and protection of natural resources, wildlife, health, and quality of life for Long Island, two of the most important people leading the charge are Adrian Esposito and Richard Amper. I say that they are the two most important people of Long Island because they are. Above the politicians, the celebrities, and other public figures, our quality of life here on Long Island wouldn't be what it is without the leadership of Adrian and Richard. Along with other environmental organizations, Adrian and Richard stand strong on the front lines of all the environmental issues facing Long Island, New York, and the country. The Citizens Campaign for the Environment is a non-for-profit organization that uniquely provides public involvement to key environmental concerns. As the executive director of this program, Adrian helps the citizens of the communities increase their influence and participation in important environmental campaigns, giving the people a stronger voice in the development of public policies and legislative agendas. And Long Island's Pine Barrens Society, which is also a non-for-profit organization led by Richard Amper, is an environmental education and advocacy organization that focuses on protecting drinking water and preserving open space, especially in the Long Island Pine Barrens.
One of the most important things for those of us here on Long Island is the environment. It's what makes living on Long Island so special.
The work that Richard Amper and Adrian Esposito do is so important for our future.
We're responsible for many of the things that represent the suburban quality of life and the protection of that quality of life.
All of the different naturally occurring assets that we have here on Long Island, we have to guard them jealously.
I would say that we have Long Island leaders like Adrian Esposito, Citizens Campaign for the Environment. Dick Amper has been a leader for many years.
And we have to look 20 years out into our future and make sure that we still have our parks, we still have a clean and protected source of water.
Dick Amper and Adrian Esposito and others who have been advocating and have been so dedicated.
So that's why it's very important in county government that people participate.
And it's not a Republican-Democrat thing. On a bipartisan basis, we all think we need to protect the Long Island environment for our generations to come.
And this is my Long Island.
The Pine Barrens is Long Island's premier ecosystem. That is the most desirable place to protect. That's because it sits atop the greatest quantities of the purest drinking water that's left on Long Island.
Not everyone on Long Island knows where their drinking water comes from. There's some genuine confusion out there.
No, I do not know exactly where my drinking water comes from.
I have no idea where my drinking water comes from. I'd imagine some type of refinery.
I would say the drinking water comes from the springs.
Reservoir? No idea. Where?
Sewage drain, I guessed. I don't really know. I guess that would be it. Sewage drain, and they would clean it from there.
I'd never even thought about that before. I don't know, what are those, the Finger Lakes, Great Lakes upstate? I don't know.
I technically get mine from my faucet, usually. You know, bathtub, maybe?
I don't know. I don't know.
Long Island is the first federally designated sole source aquifer. That means we don't get water and can't get water from upstate reservoirs like New York City can. Ours comes from beneath our feet.
100% of our drinking water comes from directly underneath our feet. It's called a sole source aquifer, which means it's our only source of drinking water.
The quality of our drinking water island-wide is declining precipitously.
You know, sometimes people think that some of the degradation is natural. But I have to tell you honestly, a lot of it isn't.
The main source of water to our aquifer and our drinking water is rainfall. And that is, so it rains and the rainfall hits the land and then trickles down into the aquifer. And therefore anything that's on top of the land or under the land, like a septic tank or a cesspool, is going to affect the quality of that water as it seeps through the aquifer.
The quality of that water is based upon what's going on the surface.
A lot of the degradation of that water in those bays is because of human activity.
We are seeing an alarming increase in many things that shouldn't be in our drinking water. That's a concern, obviously. And we're going to need to work with everyone to try and change the direction that things are headed in.
The irony is, if you ask the public, do you want clean drinking water? Do you want clean bays? Do you want renewable power? 80% of them say yes. Yes, I do.
So when we preserve an area like the Long Island Pine Barrens, where nothing will get built and nothing will enter the aquifer, we're securing a supply of the purest drinking water in the state of New York for our population.
Here is Long Island's most important asset, critical asset that we need to grow and sustain ourselves for now and in the future. And yet, there isn't an entity that's in charge of protecting it, maintaining it, sustaining it. That is a big gap in our process, one we need to fix and one we need to fill.
You suggested that Citizens Campaign and the Pine Barren Society, Adrian Esposito, and I have been on the cutting edge of land preservation.
And I think one of the things that all the environmental groups have learned and do well is team up together and say, we need land. We need to preserve it. It's a legacy. It's part of our history. It's part of our identity here on Long Island.
Along Long Island, economic growth and clean drinking water go hand in hand. You really can't have one without the other. The economy on Long Island cannot grow without a clean drinking water supply.
Economic growth does not need to be contingent upon building on land, and that's been the old model for economic growth in Long Island. But we've got major universities here on Long Island, major technology firms, and I think going forward, relying more on technology and innovation for economic growth would help us.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that environmental groups team up on are things like land preservation.
Unlike other places around the state that can get their drinking water from lakes or rivers or other water bodies, we have no plan B once our drinking water is gone. So we need to be real good stewards and real good observers of what is happening and understand that it's up to us to make sure that this resource is available for the future.
Wide areas or large areas of land allow for the rainwater to seep through that land mass and go back down to the underground aquifer and recharge it with clean and also plentiful drinking water.
Up to 84% of the people who live on Long Island, as badly taxed as they are, have gone to the polls and pushed a lever and said, we'll give government even more money, more than $1.5 billion to protect these resources. So I would want to argue that it's the people of Long Island that have saved Long Island, not any two organizations or two individuals.
I'm Joe Rock. This is my Long Island.
When it comes to Long Island, maybe that's just what it is, something in the water. After all, Long Island and New York do have a reputation for the best pizza and bagels. That's because of our water. And I know I'm using the term in a metaphorical sense, but maybe that's just what it is, something in the water. Maybe it's drinking water, or maybe it's just our beautiful shorelines. And it doesn't matter which shoreline of Long Island it is, they're all beautiful. Whether you're hanging out at the beginning of Long Island in Brooklyn, by the Shore Road Parks Conservancy, overlooking the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, or whether it be at the end of Long Island at Montauk Point, catching the waves for some awesome surfing. As you have seen, Long Island has had a varied but interesting history. Long Island has had a slave history, in which African Americans have been an integral part of Long Island. And since the late 1700s, African Americans have helped to make huge strides and extraordinary impacts to our amazing Long Island history.
During the time of slavery, at least 1/3 of the slave population had Native American roots. Many slaves would escape to the woods and join different Native American tribes.
We have different races, and it's wonderful when you think about the way people get along. We have what we call a global community.
I came from an environment growing up here in the village of Freeport where a lot of old timers, and even back then it was diverse. I grew up around Germans, Italians, Jewish, Polish, you name it.
We have had a Revolutionary War history known as the Battle of Long Island, which included the famous raid of Sag Harbor in 1777. The battle marked the first American victory in the state of New York after New York City and Long Island had fallen to the British in 1776. Of course, Long Island has had a nautical and maritime history. I would imagine that's a given, being that we're surrounded by water. Two places to learn about Long Island's nautical and maritime history are the Whaling Museum of Cold Spring Harbor and Sag Harbor's Whaling Historical Museum. From nautical to aeronautical, Long Island has become a staple to our country's aeronautical history. What is now Roosevelt Field Mall was once Roosevelt Airfield, the start of where Charles Lindbergh made his historical 1927 non-stop flight from New York to Paris, France. Aerospace companies like Republic Aviation in Farmingdale built the P-47 fighter aircraft, famed during World War II. Grumman Aircraft had locations in Bethpage in Nassau County and Calverton in Suffolk County. Grumman's was responsible for producing the F-14 U.S. Navy fighter plane, made famous in the 1986 movie Top Gun. And the Apollo lunar module that landed the men on the moon? Yeah, that was built by Grumman's too. One of 13 lunar modules produced by Grumman's is now on display at the Cradle of Aviation Museum, which was the former Mitchell Air Force Base. How awesome is that? Speaking of space, imagine taking a flight out into space and looking down at the world. I tell you that Long Island even looks cool from outer space. Very cool. Here on Long Island, there are an awful lot of things we hold pride in. Every entity of Long Island is a story in itself, past or present. The easiest way for me to describe Long Island is that we are one massive community with many subcultures entwined within it. It's no simple task that in just a film are you even scratching the surface of what Long Island is truly about. We are a strong island, not because we're flexing our muscles, and it's not to say that Long Island is any better than Jersey strong or Boston strong. The people of Long Island are a proud and humbled people. They accomplish many wonderful things with extraordinary majesty and balance. Long Island has an abundance of amazing, wonderful people that every day are giving something in the effort to help those that are less fortunate. There are hundreds of thousands of individuals and organizations that practice what they preach as far as well-being and good nature is concerned. A prime example would be one of Long Island's most important organizations, Long Island Cares. Long Island Cares is one of the region's most comprehensive hunger assistance organizations, serving thousands of individuals and families in need, and the region's very first food bank. Along with his wife, one of music's legendary and inspirational singers and songwriters, Harry Chapin, founded Long Island Cares in 1980, a non-for-profit which benefits the hungry on Long Island by providing emergency food and sponsoring programs that help families achieve self-sufficiency and educating the general public about hunger. Today, another famous musician is leading the charge on battling hunger and continuing the heartfelt efforts of Harry Chapin. Twisted Sister frontman Dee Snider was also a lifelong resident of Long Island. After 10 years of raising money for the March of Dimes on Long Island and 14 years of March of Dimes work all over the country, Dee changed the cause that he wrote for and started raising money in an effort to help our Long Island friends and neighbors in need. Dee Snyder and Long Island Cares aims to make Harry Chapin's dream a reality and see that every mouth is fed. In Dee's personal words, there's so much work that needs to be done in our own backyard. Another amazing example would be someone like Bob Palacastro, the founder of Angelus House, an amazing non-for-profit organization that helps families with children of severe disabilities and medical conditions. This organization has helped to simplify home care options for families by coordinating the extensive array of services needed to support medically frail children at home. To my knowledge, there is no other organization in the world that does what Angelus House is doing to care for these medically frail children and their families. Even the celebrities understand the impact of this wonderful organization and are always willing to use their celebrity status to lend support by donating their time and helping to raise funds and awareness for Angelus House. The Guardians of Rescue, another awesome non-for-profit organization led by Robert Messeri. Rob and his team members work endlessly to protect the rights and well-being of all animals and come to the aid of those in distress. The Guardians of Rescue are about people helping animals and animals helping people. I was there with the Guardians of Rescue when they spent tireless weeks in Staten Island after Hurricane Sandy. They scoured the devastation of Staten Island, looking for lost, displaced, or injured and sick animals, bringing tons of donated food, clothing, and necessities, not just for the animals, but also for those people who were without power or homes. Some of them, to this day, are still without a place to call home.
Thanks. Whoever's going to see that, thank you. Well, thanks for the help. We need it. Thank you.
These are just a handful of examples of why I feel Long Island is an awesome place to be.
The diversity of opportunity, the diversity of life, from the South Shore to the North Shore, from the vineyards out on the North Fork to the hustle and bustle of South Shore commerce. I mean, it is just a remarkable experience, and it all sits on this 100-mile island.
So what do you see for the future of Long Island? How can we continue to protect its vital resources?
There's, I think, a two-edged sword here, double-edged sword. We have to protect the natural beauty because, after all, that's basically what attracts so many people to the island. We're having all these people where we have a great populations in Nassau and Suffolk, and so we have to make sure that the economic vitality of the island is preserved as well.
I look back at our extraordinary history and the people that have helped and continue to help shape and cultivate Long Island to be the strong island we claim it to be. For that reason, I am proud to say, this is my Long Island.
This is our Long Island.
This is my Long Island.
This is our Long Island. This is my Long Island. This is my Long Island. This is my Long Island.